Hello there, and welcome to part 5 of reasons why I thought I could be autistic, which ultimately led to me getting a diagnosis earlier this year at the age of 49. And I think this is going to be the last of the series now because, to be honest, I could keep talking about all of the reasons why I thought I was autistic, but I have to draw a line under it somewhere. And my main motivation for doing this series was basically because, we often hear people say, gosh, everybody's autistic these days. I think it's just a load of introverted people just looking for whatever diagnosis. And while many autistic people may well be introverted, we know the reasons as to why they're autistic are in their absolute multitude. So I just wanted to do this series really to show the amount of thought processes that an autistic person has to go through in order to become a self-realised autistic or go for a diagnosis of autism. It's not an easy conclusion to come to, and that's the message really that I want to give from this series. So let's get started. Reason number 1 is friendships, and I've basically had issues and difficulties with pretty much every friendship in my life, and it's only now I can really understand why, because I've got this new understanding of myself and really trying to see my whole life really through the lens of being autistic is really useful. But I found friendships just really hard, and they've often been pretty short-lived and really intense, and in many ways they've felt like a kind of special interest when they've kind of come around. So I've put all of my kind of efforts into them, and of course when you're doing that there's a real risk of burnout, because as a high masking autistic person, if you're seeing this person for a lot of the time, you're not getting time away to kind of regulate yourself. So it's obviously going to lead to burnout, and it certainly has for me many times over. And I think it's something that we see a lot in autistic people. A lot of us are desperate for friendships and connections, but it's something that many of us struggle with in very many ways. Number 2 is getting easily fixated on things. And what I mean by this is when I've got something that's kind of bothering me mainly, and I'm kind of searching for a way in terms of trying to troubleshoot or trying to process perhaps a problem, I will continually talk about this thing until I'm able to kind of deal with it in many ways. And this drives Ian bonkers at times, and I can certainly see why, because he'll say, Lizzie, you're talking in a loop now. We have discussed this numerous times now, but it feels like I'm not able to process things in a quiet way or let my brain work on things quietly in the background, in that I have to talk about it out loud in order to process it and kind of fully deal with it, really. Reason number 3, I think, links pretty well to reason number 2 actually, and it's catastrophizing. And if there's something to catastrophize about, you can be sure I'll find a way to catastrophize about it. It's just something that I've always done. And I think this is certainly something that's common within autistic people, because we've often led a life of trauma, and it's a way almost of really trying to establish danger within any given situation, really, or to be on alert for danger. So we may well come to the worst case scenario in order to prepare our brain, really, in order to deal with that event if it were to happen. Because of this hypervigilance, it's really exhausting in itself, really, and it's certainly a trait that I really wish I didn't have, because I think any kind of fight or flight response on the body is yeah, it's not good, is it? Reason number 4 is over-explaining, and I think this is something that is really common in autistic people. At least I've seen a lot of discussion about this online, and this is something that certainly relates to me. And for me, it's one of the more challenging things about running a YouTube channel, because I'll always wonder about, did I give enough information about this kind of certain thing? Did I give enough context? Did I give sources for whatever claim that I've made during a video? Did I give enough background? It's really kind of frustrating at times. I'm very aware that I do it, but I'm in little control of it, really. My brain is kind of asking me to consider these things all of the time, and it's a very difficult thought process to break, really. And interestingly, I'm like this in all forms of communications. Like with email communication, I am terrible for just providing too much information, too much context. I just provide too much, and it's really difficult for me to kind of edit this information, really, all these thought processes. And very often when I need to send a response via email to somebody, I'll just ask Ian to check it over with me, that so I haven't provided just too much to overwhelm the other person, really. And I think I have got better at this over the years, certainly in terms of email communication, but yeah, it's difficult to know where to draw the line at times, isn't it? And of course, it's really easy to understand why autistic people have this need to over explain things, because we've been misunderstood for so much of our lives that we want to communicate as much as we can so that we're not misunderstood, really. Reason number 5 is getting very easily stressed. Now, I know that getting stressed about things is a very human response. Everybody gets stressed, and it's a normal reaction to challenging events. But for me, I don't have the kind of middle ground that other people seem to have, really. I go from not stressed at all to really stressed within a matter of moments, and it's almost like I don't get any kind of warning signs, or I don't get any kind of gradients or scales of stressedness, if that's a word. Basically, I just go from 0 to 100 really easily, and it creates just a horrible effect in my body. It creates all of this horrible adrenaline and cortisol, and I'm left kind of dealing with that, really. And it feels almost like my body has kind of gone into shock a little bit, really. Like, for instance, if I have to make a customer complaint about something, I'll invariably start off really polite, really accommodating, completely understand the other person's perspective, and if things don't go my way, or if they seem in any way unreasonable, I will lose my temper really easily, and I absolutely hate this about myself. And it's really difficult, actually, to know how to combat this. The only thing that I've found effective in any way is to really try and avoid situations that I know I'm going to find stressful, or I know that there's potential for me to almost lose my temper. So I'll do my absolute best to avoid them. But yeah, I'd be really interested to know if this is something that you also experience and how you combat it. Reason number 6 is having difficulties with directions. And I've just always found this really difficult. I just do not know how people are able to get from A to B really easily. And I didn't actually pass my driving test till I was 30. And although I was absolutely delighted to be able to drive a car on my own, I can't tell you the amount of stress that it caused me in terms of trying to find places and not getting completely lost. And I remember about a week after passing my driving test, I decided to go to a local city centre. I was going to do some shopping, and somebody had given me some very kind of loose directions as to how to get there. So I followed these directions and got completely lost, and needless to say, never made it to the city centre. And I had to really try and focus on getting home. And I did get home, but I was completely frantic all the way home because it was just, I couldn't believe how difficult it was in trying to just get from A to B. I found it unbelievably difficult. And I think pretty much straight away after that event, I was so terrified by the thought of driving. I bought a TomTom, so I'd have something at least to help me with directions, but I still found it really, really hard. And because this software isn't able to tell you which lanes to get into generally, or certainly it never used to be able to, in many ways it just didn't help me because I needed really clear directions in which lane to get into, which turning to take, and I just felt that it was quite unhelpful. So I just at that point decided only ever to drive locally, and I pretty much only ever did. And I also have real difficulties in giving directions to other people. I just really kind of dread in many ways people stopping me to ask directions because it takes a lot out of me, if I'm honest. I have to really think about where I am, where it is they want to get to, and then I have to think about the easiest way to explain to them how to get somewhere. And yeah, I find it really difficult. And interestingly, I have to really think about which is left and which is right in terms of, which is your left hand, which is your right hand. It doesn't come to me instantaneously. I always need a moment to figure out which is which. And similarly, I have issues with, compass directions, north, east, south, west. I have to really think about what they are and what they mean. It's really interesting. Reason number 7, I have had little to no interest in a traditional life, by which I mean marriage and children and all the other stuff that comes with the idea of a kind of family life, really. I think I figured out in childhood actually that I had no interest in having children, and my mind has never changed, not even wavered for a second ever since then. I just knew that it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't something that I was interested in at all. And similarly with marriage, we've got this idea about young girls kind of dreaming about their marriage and what their wedding will be like, what their wedding dress will look like. And I just had, just no interest. And I used to be kind of fascinated as to why other girls at school would be just so interested in all of this stuff, really. For me, I was just far more interested in arts. I just desperately wanted to be an artist from a young age, and I had very little, or gave very little consideration to anything around that, really. I should point out that, of course, very many autistic people choose to get married and or have children. But for some of us, not wanting or not being able to have a traditional family life is absolutely part of our experience of being autistic. And I do actually have a video on the reasons why I chose not to have children, and I'll link that down below. Don't get me wrong, I did hope that I'd maybe have a partner one day, but because I thought I was so weird, I just thought, it's probably unlikely, really. I don't really see myself with a long-term partner. And, I've been really lucky. I have met my life partner, and that kind of took me by surprise, if I'm honest, because it wasn't something that I was expecting to happen at all. But the whole thought of kind of getting married, I just have no real interest in it, really. And alongside this, actually, I think this is quite interesting that I don't have any desire to collect kind of souvenirs or mementos about my life. People take photographs all the time, don't they, to capture memories, and it's just not something that I've done. It's really interesting. I think I've only got about 3 photographs of myself from childhood because my parents just weren't interested in doing any of this either, really. And even as a kind of teenager and as an adult, I take very few photographs of me and Ian, or anybody else that's kind of friends with us or family members. I'm just not into this kind of whole thing, really. And I'd love to know actually if this is something you can connect with as well, whether you're just not interested in keeping kind of photographs or other mementos, really, because it's not something I've really heard talked about actually within the autistic community. Reason number 8 is having a monotropic brain. So monotropism is essentially a way of thinking where a person is more likely to focus on a very small number of things, really. So they're not able to give their sort of time and attention to very many things. Now, being monotropic doesn't mean in any way that somebody is autistic. It's just that autistic people are more likely to have a monotropic brain or a monotropic way of thinking. And when we think about autistic people with special interests, it really does demonstrate how monotropism kind of is put into action, really. We divert all of our time and passion into the few areas that really interest us. And monotropism has affected my life in so many ways. And when I think about even the workplace, I've worked in many roles, mainly in office settings, where I've had to do all sorts of different things within the remit of the job, and I found it really difficult to move from task to task. And when we think about job adverts that often ask for applicants who are really good at multitasking or working on various things at once, or being able to juggle numerous projects, it's really difficult when you've got a monotropic brain, because I find it so difficult to work on one thing and then suddenly have to jump to another thing and then jump back to the original thing. And I think there's a lot going on with kind of transitions there as well, and difficulties around transitions, but it's always been an area that I've struggled in. And there is actually an online test that you can do to discover how monotropic your brain is, and I'll leave that linked below. But I think it might be nice actually for me and Ian to do this test at some point in a future video, because we strongly suspect that Ian is ADHD, so I think it'd be interesting to see the difference between an autistic person and an ADHD person. So yeah, I suspect we'll do that at some point. Reason number 9 is overproductivity. This is something that I really struggle with, and I'm planning to do a video specifically on this at some point soon. But it's something that I really struggle with. I always feel like I should be doing something of value that's useful, or is helping me to kind of learn about a thing that might be helpful in the future. I just find it hard to rest and relax, really. I've just got this overwhelming need to just kind of do stuff, really. Like, for instance, whenever we've gone on holiday together, myself and my partner, I've always kind of struggled with just kind of lying there on a sun lounger and doing nothing and just staring at the sky. And although part of me gets this, even in my mind, this sounds like a really lovely, relaxing thing to do, actually putting it into practice, it's really difficult for me just to do nothing. I think through the years this has got a little bit easier, in that as as Ian's got to know me, he's developed strategies to help me with this, and it's almost been without me knowing in many ways. But whenever we plan to go away, in the weeks and maybe even the months before we go away, he'll be asking me about things that I want to do on holiday, including, are there any books that I want to read? Are there any albums that I want to kind of get into? Do I want to take any sketchbooks away with me? And all of this kind of stuff, really, which is has helped me, I have to say, because at least I feel like I have access to doing things that I find useful while I'm away on holiday, and I do my best to try and relax in as much as I can, but I definitely need to have some kind of special interests really on my holiday with me, because I just feel absolutely lost without them. Reason number 10 is perimenopause, and I felt really compelled to include perimenopause within the essentially 50 reasons why I thought I was autistic, because it has had such an impact on my life, and in many ways it's the reason why I found out that I was autistic. And I have had just the most horrendous time in perimenopause, and I have actually done a whole video about this, which I'll link below if you want to go and check that out after this one. But it's thought to be the case that autistic people will often have a more challenging time in perimenopause because of all of the sensory stuff that we go through. You know, I really struggled with that and still do. And also, routines became so important to me, and they still are. I feel absolutely lost if I can't stick to my routines. And it just got to the point where I thought, why am I having such an awful time with all of this? I can't tell you the amounts of symptoms that I've had, because there have been so many and so varied, and they do come and go, but it has been a really challenging time for me. And I was really interested actually to see on Instagram the other week, Autistica, which is a UK research charity which looks specifically into autism. When they started to look at autism and menopause, they were horrified to discover that there wasn't one paper out there. There had been no research conducted on it whatsoever. So this is still an unknown territory, and like so many other areas of autism, there's just such a drastic need for research so that we can understand ourselves and people within our community so much better. I think it's really important for autistic people out there in perimenopause and in menopause to know that there could be very many additional challenges that you're going through, and it needs recognition. So there we have it. There are my 50 reasons why I thought I was autistic, and I think it just really evidences again all of the stuff that we have to think about in order to become a self-realised autistic person or to go for a diagnosis. You know, it's really not an easy process, and I hope you found this useful in some way. I probably will do a compilation of the 50 reasons why at some point for those that prefer just to have one video, but I would love to know which reasons that you can relate to and those that you can't relate to, because it just really evidences how different we all are. So yeah, thank you for watching all 5 videos hopefully, and if you haven't, I'll link to the playlist down below, so give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.